Hi guys, it's Audrey from Fairview Public Library in Henry County, Georgia. Miss Tiffany from the McDonough Public Library and I are doing a series of mini book talks for the Georgia Children's Book Award nominees. These are also the 20 titles that are used for the Helen Ruffin Reading Bowl contest. These books are great for 4th through 7th or 8th grade kids. The characters in the books are mostly about 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th graders. And it's real life trials and tribulations that these kids have. And I really like these books and think they're good literature for books and teach kids how to ask the difficult questions, how to ask for help, and when to believe in the adults that are around you and understand that they struggle with certain problems too, and they're trying to lead kids in the best way that they can. Anyway, today's story is The Boy at the Back of the Class by Angeli Ralph. Ralph? This is a debut novel by this author. Let me read to you what's on the inside cover. On the 3rd Tuesday of the school year, a new kid arrives in Miss Khan's class, Ahmet, a Syrian refugee. Everyone is curious about the newcomer, especially since he never smiles, and he doesn't talk much either. Still, one student is determined to become his friend and learns that standing up for others has the incredible potential to change an entire community for the better. Packed with humor and heart, Angeli Ralph's debut novel raises key questions about any refugee crisis and highlights the importance of being an ally. Timely, yet timeless, this story encourages kindness and reminds readers that everyone deserves a place to call home. A refugee is a person that is trying to escape oppression, or in this particular case, this family, this little boy's family, is trying to escape Syria where there is a war, and the city around him is being bombed. So he and his family, his mom, his dad, his baby sister, and his cat, take as much as they can carry, what they absolutely need, and they start out on foot and walk away from the home that they have known for many years. And they try to get to another country. Well, unfortunately, along the way, this little boy gets separated from his mom and dad. He finds himself in London, England. He is taken in by a foster family, and he begins school at this London, England school where these other kids are. They're all very curious about him because he doesn't talk much. He doesn't know much English. But they do find out, yes, he likes candy, but probably not as much as they do. He appreciates fruit. He enjoys living in a house, no longer a tent. And he has the opportunity to go to school and to learn. But he's still very much missing his family. The child in this book, Alexa, is determined to become his friend, and she has 3 other BFFs, and they agree to help her. Well, they come up with what they believe is the greatest idea in the world. They are going to approach the Queen and ask her for help to find Ahmet's family. Well, that's quite an accomplishment, quite a goal there. It's risky, it's a little bit dangerous, but that's what they set out to do. And they talk about the plight of refugees all over the world. Some people don't appreciate people from other countries coming into their own country, taking jobs, expecting handouts? Well, that's not always the way it is. This little boy tried to get away from a war. He didn't want to be separated from his parents. And he has parents who are actually very good people. One's a teacher, and the other one is, I believe, a scientist. And they could get jobs in London as long as people are willing to give them the chance. It's a very good book. I highly recommend it if you really like London and things like talking about the Queen and the palace, Buckingham Palace, and the changing of the guard, if you know what those sort of things are. This is called Saving Winslow by Sharon Creech. Let me read what's inside the cover first. Louis doesn't have the best luck when it comes to nurturing small creatures, not even lightning bugs, worms, or goldfish. So when his father brings home a sickly, newborn mini donkey, he's determined to save him. He names him Winslow, and taking care of him helps Louis feel closer to his brother Gus, who is far, far away in the army. Everyone worries that Winslow won't survive, especially Louis's quirky new friend, Nora. But as Louis's bond with Winslow grows, surprising events prove that this fragile donkey and Louis are stronger than anyone could have imagined. From Newbery Medal winner and New York Times bestselling author Sharon Creech comes a tale about love and friendship and letting go. This book was really a very interesting read about a small 10-year-old boy who is determined to save a little runt donkey that was born and brought to his house. When Dad shows up, he's like, well, let's see what happens. It's probably gonna die. But Louis is determined not to let this little gray donkey die. This little gray donkey came from his uncle's farm, Uncle Pete. And even Uncle Pete thought it was gonna die. So that's why he gave it to his brother and said, take this home. Let's see what Louis can do with it. So Louis accepts the challenge and takes care of this little gray donkey. But unfortunately, Louis lives in a place that is not zoned for farm animals. Uncle Pete's place was, but not Louis's house. But it's just such a tiny little runt, and it's just a baby, and everybody thinks it's going to die eventually, so they allow Louis to take care of this donkey down in the basement to get started, down in the basement. And Louis sets up a little bed down there and sleeps with him and feeds him every hour, and the donkey starts surviving. And this is a great thing, and it really boosts Louis's confidence. So he keeps on going. And then he meets Nora. Well, Nora's a little nervous that this donkey isn't going to make it either. And she doesn't want to get close to it if she's going to end up having to say goodbye. But Louis and Nora both learn that sometimes you just got to put forth the effort, and getting close to a little gray donkey like this, or maybe even a little person, is important. And that's what helps make them grow and survive. Well, as the story turns out, I don't want to spoil anything, but as the story turns out, Winslow proves his worth, and he eventually goes back and lives on Uncle Pete's farm. But it's a great little story. If you love animals, you will like this story. Gordon Corman's The Unteachables. This is a really good book. It has been out consistently at our libraries. Let me tell you what is written on the inside cover of this book. The Unteachables are a notorious class of misfits, delinquents, and academic train wrecks. Like Aldo with anger management issues, Parker, who can't read, Kiana, who doesn't even belong in the class or any class, and Elaine, rhymes with pain. The Unteachables have been removed from the student body and isolated in room 117. Their teacher is Mr. Zachary Kermit, the most burned out teacher in all of Greenwich. He was once a rising star, but his career was shattered by a cheating scandal that still haunts him. After years of phoning it in, he's finally 1 year away from that early retirement. But the superintendent has his own plans to torpedo that idea, and it involves assigning Mr. Kermit to the Unteachables. The Unteachables never thought they'd find a teacher who had a worse attitude than they did, and Mr. Kermit never thought he would actually care about teaching again. Over the course of a school year, though, room 117 will experience mayhem, destruction, and maybe even a shot at redemption. This is a great story about middle grade teaching and middle grade school. It's not only for kids, I think, but Mr. Kermit, aka Ribbit, is just trying to bide his time until early retirement. He was really hurt by the scandal that happened many years ago when one of his students got hold of a test and sold it for profit. And when the scores were great and everybody was saying, oh, what a great school this must be, the principal was accepting all the credit for that. But then when it came out that all these kids cheated by getting a hold of this test early, he threw Mr. Kermit under the bus. And Mr. Kermit got in trouble for this cheating scandal that wasn't even his fault. But ever since then, he's just kind of lost his spark for teaching. And now, 1 year to retirement, he's been assigned to teach the special ed class. We all know what special ed class is. They call it SCS at this school. Self-contained special class. It's the 8th grade class, the kids that nobody really knows what to do with. Their grades are questionable, their behavior is questionable, and teachers really don't want to flunk them because they don't want to have to deal with these kids anymore. They just want to be able to pass them on to the high school. So here we're talking about the Unteachables. Kiana is a young student who is living with Dad temporarily. And technically, she has never even been registered at school yet. She happens to bump into somebody, and she has their schedule sticking out of her book bag, but it's not really her schedule. She goes into the office to find out where she's supposed to be, and somebody sees the corner of the schedule sticking out of her book bag and says, "Oh, you're supposed to be in room 117. She's like, but that's not even my schedule. But they're not listening to her, so she goes down to room 6. She thinks, what does it matter? I'm not going to be here that long. As soon as Mom gets back from this job, I'm going to go back and live with her. I don't want to live with Mom, my step monster, she kept calling her, and my dad. And then you have Aldo. Aldo has anger management problems. He gets angry pretty easily. And if people don't treat him right, he'll get upset about it. And then there's Barnstormer, he was the football star, but he got hurt. And since his grades aren't really where they should be, he can't sail into high school or get into college on a scholarship or anything because he's hurt now. So he's really going to have to pick up the pace here and get back in the game here. Get back in the education game, not necessarily the football game. And Mateo's one of the biggest nerds ever. Everything's a book or a movie with him, so much so Mr. Kermit, the teacher, is also known as Ribbit because of Kermit the Frog. But you see, things start happening, And like Barnstormer wants to be able to go to the pep rally. And he should go to the pep rally because he is still technically part of the football team. But somewhere along the way, they decide that the special ed class should not go to the pep rally because they'll cause a commotion, destruction, whatever. But Mr. Kermit sticks up for him and says, hey, he's still part of the football team. Yes, he's going. I'm sorry. And gets Barnstormer out of the class and sends him down to the pep rally. And other things happen, like the guy who's a really good artist, but he tends to fall asleep in class. Let's see, that's Miss Raheem. Raheem falls asleep in class a lot, but he's a really good artist. And along the way, Mr. Kermit gets him into an art class at the local community college in the evenings when he's awake. And the kid really excels in this art class that's challenging him. So Raheem really has a lot of respect for Mr. Kermit after that. So Mr. Kermit's gaining the respect of the students, and the students are realizing they aren't the total screw-ups that the school has written them off as. So it's a really good book. You really need to read the whole thing. It's funny. A couple of times it's sad, but it's a really good book. So enjoy The Unteachables by Gordon Corman.
Hi guys and gals, and welcome back to another Georgia Children Book Award nominee and Helen Ruffin Reading Bowl Book Talk. I'm Miss Tiffany from McDonough Public Library, and today we have two new titles to talk about. First, we have All the Impossible Things by Lindsay Lackey and The Bridge Home by Padma Venkatraman or Venkatraman. I'm unsure how to say that last name, and I apologize. Both books are very different, but have a lot of common themes. For example, in All the Impossible Things, the character Red mentally refuses to accept a temporary home in foster care because she is hoping for the return for her mother and things to go back to normal. While in The Bridge Home, Vigi rejects her home because of the treatment of her and her younger sister, and they strike out on their own to find a better place. Both main characters have a vision of what they feel like a home should be and who that includes, but over the course of the story, they begin to see another vision of their home life when presented with a new type of family that makes them feel loved and welcomed. So what we're going to do is we will start with All the Impossible Things by Lindsay Lackey, and then we will finish up with The Bridge Home. So I'm going to read the inside cover and then tell you about my favorite part or any additional information. Red's inexplicable power over the wind comes from her mother. Whenever Ruby Red Bird is scared or angry, the wind picks up. And being placed in foster care, moving from family to family, tends to keep her skies stormy. Red knows she has to learn to control it, but can't figure out how. This time, the wind blows Red into the home of the Grooves, a quirky couple who run a petting zoo, complete with a dancing donkey and a giant tortoise. With their own curious gifts, Celine and Jackson Groove seem to fit like a puzzle piece into Red's heart. But just when Red starts to settle into her new life, a fresh storm rolls in, one she knows all too well, her mother. For so long, Red has longed to have her mom back in her life, and she's quickly swept up in the vortex of her mother's chaos. Now Red must discover the possible... Oh, I was doing so good. But just when Red starts to settle into her new life, a fresh storm rolls in, one she knows all too well, her mother. For so long, Red has longed to have her mother back in her life, and she quickly is swept up in the vortex of her mother's chaos. Now Red must discover the possible in the impossible if she wants to overcome her own tornadoes and find the family she needs. A bit of magic, a sprinkling of adventure, and a whole lot of heart collide in Lindsay Lackey's extraordinary middle-grade debut about a young girl navigating the foster care system in search of where she belongs. So this story, as it said, is about a girl who is in the foster care system, And she's been in there since she was, I think, 9. So she's kind of a little jaded on finding a temporary home. She just wants to be back with her mother. But when she goes to live with the Grooves, she's kind of a little reluctant to get involved with them because she thinks it's just temporary. Well, along the way, comes into my favorite part is where she not only helping with the animals and finding that sense of belonging, the way the Grooves treat the animals, but she makes another friend there and they really bond and get close. And it's such a lovely story. I think that a lot of people, even if you're not in the Helen Ruffin Reading Bowl competition or looking to read all 20 books, this one is definitely worth checking out and reading just for a real good feel-good story. Our next story is also realistic, more tragically so. Instead of the foster care system, it deals with homelessness. This is The Bridge Home by Padma Venkatraman, or Venkatraman. I'm unsure how to pronounce it, as I said. I'm going to go ahead and read the inside cover and then talk about it just a little bit more. Life is tough on the teeming streets of Chennai, India, as runaway sisters Viji and Ruku quickly discover. For cautious-minded Viji, this is not a surprise, but she hadn't realized just how vulnerable she and her sister would actually feel in this uncaring, dangerous world. Fortunately, the girls find shelter and friendship on an abandoned bridge that's also the hideout of Muthi and Arul, 2 homeless boys. The 4 of them soon form a family of sorts, sharing food and supplies and laughing together about the absurdities of life. And while making their living scavenging the city's trash heaps, as is the pits, the kids find plenty of pride to take too. After all, they are now the bosses of themselves and are truly hoping to keep it that way. Padma's moving survival story brings to light the obstacles faced by young people in many parts of the world. It is inspired by children she has met during her years in India. Her heroic characters will touch readers with their perseverance and unwavering love for each other. So, like I said, the story is a little bit harder to read just because the fact of the matter is it's based on a true story. It takes the form of the main character, Viji, writing a letter to her sister. It's a memoir of their time of leaving home due to domestic violence, only to end up homeless for a time. During that time, they do meet the 2 young boys who show them how to make money by collecting recyclables out of the landfills and the garbage. There's a bonding sense of friendship and family between the girls and the boys, and the narrator, Viji, learns to appreciate the simpler things in life. She also learns a new appreciation for her special needs sibling. So without spoiling the ending, I'm not going to say much more besides that Viji does grow through her experiences and she does get back on her feet. The story is written in a way that there's a latent sense of all that real danger that the children would be facing without being directly overt. And so while the story is based on a true story, it is something that you could read through and then just start to think about the way the world is outside of what we know. Overall, the story left me feeling a little heartbroken, as it could very easily be true, and there are children living in that sort of condition. There were a lot of moments, though, in the story that were full of hope and a lot of uplifting spiritual moments. And I think I found that most of how the boys were surviving, Mathi and Arul, the way that they just accepted Viji and her sister immediately when others kind of shunned them and started helping them learn how to survive in their new moment. That was probably my favorite part of the story overall, and it led them to a safer place in the end. And one other thing that I really like about this story is at the beginning, there is a glossary of terms that come up. And it says, of course, it explains what those words are. Most of it's food related. Some of it is cultural related because this does take place in India. So it's just real interesting always learning about another's cultures and the terms they use for certain things that we might not have a word for in English. But Yeah, so I think that even though the story is a little hard to get through as far as it is tragic, it is also very, very powerful. In fact, I want to read the end or the back of the book. Another person, author, who wrote Amal Unbound, Asha Saeed. She says, readers will be captivated by this beautifully written novel about young people who must use their instinct and grit to survive. Padma shares with us an unflinching peek into the reality of millions of homeless children, how they live every day, but it also infuses her story with hope and bravery that will inspire readers and stay with them long after turning the final page. So, like I said, even though it is, a little tough, the realistic side of it, it is a beautiful story. And if you're looking for an outside perspective of somewhere else in the world, and just the whole cultural side of it and things going on, it does give you a good sneak peek into that as well. So I hope that you enjoy it. It is a shorter story compared to some of the others, but it is still packed full of fantastic storytelling. All right. Well, that has been it for this book talk. We have, I believe, just one more video left before we start wrapping everything up for the Helen Ruffin Reading Bowl book talks. So I have had fun with this project, and I hope you have as well. Look out for our last video. I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks. Bye-bye.